A montage of bustling French markets in the mid-90s. Baskets of fresh baguettes. Cafes with wicker chairs spilling onto cobbled streets. And children clutching small change as they approach a candy stall. In 1996, France was a country of both tradition and transition. The franc was still king. And the 5 centimes coin, small, light, and often overlooked, played a quiet yet essential role in daily life. A coin in every pocket. The aluminium bronze 5 centimes piece was the smallest denomination, still circulating in the mid-90s, yet it had a presence that belied its size. Whether rattling in a cafe cashier's till or sliding across a boulangerie counter as change, the coin was everywhere. For many French people, these coins were part of the everyday noise of transactions, the clink in your pocket. After buying a newspaper, the little pile of change handed over after paying for a Pain AU chocolate. Its lightweight just 3.92 grams meant it was almost weightless in the palm, and at 19.5 millimeters in diameter, it could vanish between your fingers. Still, it was part of a deeply ingrained mental arithmetic, pre-total monant, done manet rendu, and the 5 centimes coin was often the key to rounding off the math. Purchasing power in 1996. By the mid-90s, a single 5 centimes coin couldn't buy much on its own, but it had a purpose. It filled the small gaps in everyday pricing. France's pricing culture often used prices like 5.95 francs or 12.75 francs, meaning those little coins ensured customers got exact change. Here's what a few francs, supplemented by your 5 centimes, might buy in 1996. A fresh baguette, 3.50 francs. You might pay with a 5 franc coin and get your baguette plus 1 franc 50 in change. A single postage stamp, around 2.80 francs. The 5 centimes helped avoid overpaying. A metro ticket in Paris, roughly 7.50 francs again. Small coins made exact change possible. It was never the star of any purchase, but without it, you'd either lose value or wait while the cashier rounded in their favor. Children and the 5 centimes coin. For many children in the 90s, the 5 centimes coin was their first encounter with money. Parents and grandparents often slipped a handful of these coins into small hands to buy candy from the local epicery. While individually they had little buying power, to a child, a few coins together could be turned into a small paper bag of sweets. It was the sound, the clinking in a pocket or coin purse that gave the meaning. The cashier's perspective. If you worked behind a counter in France in 1996, you knew that handling 5 centimes coins was both a necessity and a mild annoyance. They were easy to drop, harder to pick up, and customers sometimes refused them as change a subtle sign. They were beginning to lose favor. Still, businesses couldn't do without them. Small cafes, bakeries, and newspaper kiosks relied on exact change to keep transactions flowing smoothly. Signs of decline. Even as they were minted in large quantities in 1996, the 5 centimes coin was beginning to fade in importance. Inflation meant fewer goods were priced in ways that made them essential, and consumers often left them behind in tip jars or charity boxes. Some people simply stored them in jars at home, forgetting them entirely, an unintentional act that foreshadowed their eventual withdrawal when the euro arrived. Small coins rarely make history. They work quietly in the background, ensuring precision in our transactions. But the 5 centimes of 1996 was more than just a piece of metal. It was a tiny companion to the rhythms of French life, present in moments big and small, until the clock began ticking toward the end of the franc itself. In 1996, as the Liberty 5 centimes clinked through everyday life in France, a quiet but monumental change was already in motion. A new currency, the euro, was coming, and it would change everything. The Maastricht Agreement and a new era. The roots of the euro lay years earlier. In the 1992 Maastricht Treaty, European Union member states agreed to create a single currency to strengthen economic ties and simplify trade. For France, it was a bold move. It meant abandoning the franc, a symbol woven deeply into the national identity since the late 18th century. By 1996, the decision was no longer hypothetical. The transition was being planned in detail. Coin designs, minting schedules, and exchange rates. Citizens began to hear a new word el euro in political speeches and newspaper headlines. The countdown to change. Even though the euro would not physically arrive until 2002, preparations were intense in the mid-90s. Design competitions were held for the new euro coins. Each nation would have its own national side. For France, designs by Fabien Courchiade and Joaquin Jimenez were chosen. Exchange rate fixations were discussed. The final rate would be set at 6.55957 francs to 1 euro. Minting operations began years ahead, so that when launch day came, billions of coins would already be ready. For the humble 5 centimes, this was the writing on the wall. Once the euro arrived, its value would translate to roughly 0.0076 euros, less than 1 euro cent. There would be no direct equivalent coin in the new system. Supporters saw the euro as a powerful symbol of European unity, a tool for easier travel, and a way to compete economically with the United States and Japan. Skeptics worried about losing the franc's cultural heritage. Coins like the Liberty 5 centimes, with their Marianne bust, were not just money, they were national symbols. Pragmatists simply wondered how prices would be displayed, and whether the switch would lead to hidden price hikes. In markets and cafes, small talk about the euro began to mingle with the smell of fresh bread and the rattle of change. By late 1990s, mintages of certain small-denomination franc coins slowed. The 1996 Liberty 5 centimes would be one of the last high-production years before the final phase-out. Banks and retailers started preparing coin-counting machines for the dual currency period, when francs and euros would circulate together for a short time. Although few people thought about it consciously, each time they slid a 5 centimes coin across a counter, they were handling a piece of currency living out its final years. Voiceover conclusion for chapter. The euro loomed on the horizon, a new chapter for Europe, and the closing pages for the franc. For the Liberty 5 centimes, its days were numbered. But before it vanished from pockets, tills, and market stalls, it would witness one last, remarkable transformation in France's monetary history. And then, the end came. After decades of faithful service, the French franc took its final bow. The Liberty 5 centimes coin, a symbol of everyday life, was suddenly history. The final days of the franc. The euro officially became the legal currency of France on January 1, 2002. From that day, shops and banks accepted francs and euros, side by side for a short transitional period. Citizens brought jars and drawers full of coins to exchange at their local bank branches. For the Liberty 5 centimes, the moment was bittersweet. In the frenzy of the currency switch, many were tossed into sacks for bulk redemption, headed straight for the melting pot at the Monnaie de Paris Mint. Mass withdrawal and destruction. The process was swift. Coins were weighed, not counted. Bulk returns were faster than individual tallies. Low-value coins like the 5 centimes were melted by the ton, their copper-plated steel re-entering industrial use. Only a small fraction survived in private hands, forgotten in drawers, saved as mementos, or set aside by curious collectors. From currency to collectible. The 1996 Liberty 5 centimes has an unusual position in numismatic history. Not rare in mintage, over 350 million were struck. Rare in survival because of the euro changeover. Most were destroyed within just a few years. In perfect uncirculated condition, fleur de coin. These coins can fetch modest but rising prices among collectors. For sentimental collectors, value isn't in the metal, it's in the memory. The emotional side. For many French citizens, holding onto a 5 centimes wasn't about profit. It was about remembering. The feel of small coins in a child's hand when buying bonbons at a corner shop. The sound of loose change rattling in a cafe waiter's leather pouch. The distinct copper gleam of Liberty's profile in a pocket full of francs. The coin became a tangible link to life before the euro a time, when the franc was not just a currency, but a cultural touchstone. The legacy in collections today. Numismatists today view the 1996 Liberty 5 centimes as a closing chapter coin, one of the last full runs before the euro era. A historical anchor in sets of late 20th century French coins. An accessible entry point for new collectors, inexpensive, but rich in story. The 1996 Liberty 5 centimes was never meant to be rare. Yet, in the blink of an eye, it became a relic. Born in an era of change. It now rests in albums, drawers, and memory boxes, a reminder of a France that counted its worth in francs, centimes, and ideals of liberty. Sometimes, the smallest objects carry the heaviest meanings. The Liberty 5 Centimes coin may have been worth only a fraction of a franc, but in its design, in its circulation, and in its history, it holds a mirror to the French nation itself. A symbol beyond its value. The 1996 Liberty 5 Centimes is more than just a piece of metal. It represents continuity, the persistence of French currency design traditions, stretching back decades. It embodies ideals liberty, equality, fraternity, etched into the national consciousness. It reflects adaptation, how a country balances history with the demands of modernization. From pockets to memory. In daily life, the coin was so common that most people hardly noticed it. But in hindsight, those small transactions, the baguette, the morning newspaper, the metro ticket, all carried with them a sense of national familiarity. The 5 Centimes was a humble partner in millions of tiny exchanges that made up the rhythm of French life, a marker of transition. The mid-1990s were a time of economic preparation for the euro, political debates over sovereignty versus integration into the European project, cultural reflection on what it meant to be French in a globalizing world. The 5 Centimes existed right at that crossroads, minted in a France that was still fully sovereign in its currency, yet already on the path toward sharing a common European money. The human connection. Ask any French person who lived through the Franc era, and they'll have a story about coins like the 5 Centimes. A parent teaching a child to count change at the bakery. A vendor at an open-air market sliding coins into a worn leather purse. The ritual of emptying pockets into a ceramic dish by the front door after a long day. These are more than transactions, they're moments, and the coin was part of them. The 1996 coin as a time capsule. Collectors and historians alike view the 1996 issue as a time capsule of design philosophy of France that still celebrated allegorical liberty on everyday currency, monetary reality, a low-value coin in a strong national currency, cultural sentiment, the quiet pride of having money that was uniquely French, legacy for future generations. As decades pass, the 1996 Liberty 5 Centimes will continue to serve as an educational tool for teaching about pre-Euro Europe, a numismatic milestone marking the final chapter of the French franc, a symbolic keepsake for those who value France's cultural independence. A coin is never just a coin. It's a work of art, a piece of history, a token of a nation's values. The Liberty 5 Centimes of 1996 reminds us that even the smallest currency can tell the biggest stories of identity, of change, and of the enduring idea of liberty. The story of a nation's currency is the story of its people. The Liberty 5 Centimes coin, minted in 1996, may seem like a humble artifact, yet it is a witness to a France standing on the edge of transformation. A bridge between two worlds. The coin belongs to a twilight era. On one side, centuries of French monetary tradition, rooted in independence and national identity. On the other, a unified European future, where the franc would give way to the euro. The Liberty 5 Centimes carried the weight of the past even as it stepped into an uncertain future. The power of the small. Its monetary value was tiny, but its symbolic value was immense. It represented liberty not as an abstract concept, but as something you could hold in your hand. It reminded citizens daily of the ideals engraved into it, ideals that transcend coins and banknotes. It taught future generations that history isn't always grand in scale, sometimes it's measured in millimeters of copper-plated steel. Echoes of the franc. When the euro arrived in 2002, millions of francs, including countless 5 Centimes coins, were handed over, melted down, and replaced. But the memories they carried could not be smelted away. The jingle of loose change in a cafe counter, the feeling of sliding exact change across a market stall, the subtle pride of having currency that was unmistakably French. From circulation to storytelling. Today, the Liberty 5 Centimes lives on not in wallets, but in collections carefully preserved by numismatists and enthusiasts. Education used in schools to teach about currency history. Media in documentaries like this, reminding us that history is personal. The last lesson. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Liberty 5 Centimes is this. Change is inevitable in economies, in politics, in culture. But the symbols we choose to engrave into our money reflect the values we hope will never change. Fade between shots of the coin resting on a wooden desk. archival footage of French life in the 1990s, and the transition to the euro. The final frame lingers on the word Libet before fading to black. This was the Liberty 5, Centimes coin of 1996. It was small in size, modest in value, yet vast in meaning. Long after the last one left circulation, its story reminds us that history lives not only in the grand monuments, but in the smallest coins that once passed from hand to hand.